She has a long resume. I guess that's how I'll start. Emily Williams is the award-winning host of Beyond Voting podcast and democracy educator. She is also spent a lot of time just making sure that social justice is something that we all get to experience. And I think that irrespective of community and culture, social justice is something that if it goes in the wrong direction or isn't there, can negatively impact anybody in America. So I want to welcome back to the show again, Emily Williams. Good morning, Emily. Welcome back to Choose Views.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me again.
You social justice warrior.
I'm out here. I'm out here.
So, wow, these last few weeks since you were on, and I think this is, it takes me back, Emily. This is before your time because I'm older than you, but it takes me back to a soap opera that was called As the World Turns.
Mhm.
And right now, as the world turns, we have so many things that we're keeping up with and staying on top of and trying to stay on top of, trying to manage, trying to keep the world from spinning off of its axis, if you will. And inevitably, we keep coming back to one of the big ones that a lot of people just don't want to talk about. And I think it's part of social justice, and that's climate change, environmental change, climate justice. That's all tied into, I believe, social justice. Help us through that. Walk us through your observations in that space.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, thank you. It's such an important topic. I hope that listeners heard about the flooding caused by the landslide in Nepal, which happened yesterday or the day
Yeah.
before. And our most recent podcast episode was actually about climate change. And the question is climate change a social justice issue? I agree with you. I think that it is. And therefore, the question is, where's our advocacy around it, right?
Hmm.
Um, you know, I'm sure Chicagoans know about the increase in tornadoes
Yeah.
in Illinois over this
Did
current
we
year.
just, Emily, did we just, hey, this is not the top of a listing that we want to be, but did we just move to the top of the list in tornadoes for the last decade or any other state in the country?
We did. We did. There's only one other state which has had over 200 tornadoes in one year, and that's Texas. We've now surpassed that with 204 tornadoes this year. And that's a result of, a warming climate, a warmer atmosphere, more humidity in Illinois. And then we see that there are collateral effects of that, right? Gary, Indiana was without power for over 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, it's an issue that we not only need to continue to be aware of, but we also have to be asking our politicians, how are they helping us prepare for these impending climate catastrophes, right?
Yeah.
So now what happened in Nepal was a result of glaciers melting,
Right.
right? I mean, that was just the scale of that flooding was just absolutely massive. And so I think we have to prepare for more catastrophes to be coming, but not only just expecting more, but also saying, how are we actually preparing for this? And we have to hold our politicians accountable for actually preparing in the ways that we need.
I think
Upgrade.
on the backside of it too, Emily, like for example, how does Gary, Indiana, and we could, I'm gonna use the word blame, but not in an aggressive way. We could blame the local leaders in Gary, or in Porter County. For those who don't know the county that's there, that's less relevant, but the city of Gary. We could blame the governor. We've got folks on, frankly, both sides of the aisle politically and in the middle that are part of the decision-making process. The governor did just say, or did finally request for national emergency status from the federal government, which I think that exacerbated the problem. But where I'm going with this, Emily, is the preparedness is part of this conversation, but it's
Mhm.
also it's the awareness of the next. And I don't know how I can articulate this other than just to say it and let you help me, work through this. We
Mhm.
know that areas are probably more susceptible to things happening. So then if you know that, because now you have experiential data that we should then be able to use that to say, in the event that this is going to happen again, we need to have these things ready so that the people in those communities, whatever the community is, red, blue, or in the middle, are able to get through it faster and not have to wait so long for recovery. Is that too optimistic of a thing to aspire toward or request of our leadership?
No, I don't believe so. I think it's realistic and I think it's absolutely necessary. But I think it's a matter of us mapping this onto our advocacy agendas. I mean, for so long, climate change has been debated in mainstream media, and it's like we can no longer afford to debate it. We have to just start preparing for it. And in order to get our politicians to actually prepare for it, we have to make those demands as everyday citizens. And I think it's not only making the demands that allow us to be prepared for impending climate catastrophe, but it's also about looking at what are the current drains on our tax systems, on our power grid. There's a huge, data centers are popping up everywhere. They're consuming a ton of data. We know that it's not good for our water sources. They consume a disproportionate amount of water. These things are human-made crises that are exacerbating climate catastrophe. And so we also have to keep our eyes on these kinds of things to say, let's not make the problem worse, right? And we know that data centers, it's also about political advocacy. And there's lots of people here in Chicago, in Illinois, and around the country who are really speaking up to say, we don't want that burden. We don't want that burden on our pockets, on our communities, or on climate. And so we have to keep an eye on data centers. And then we also have to continue to find ways to hold our politicians accountable because, it's for many communities, it will be a matter of survival, like we saw what happened in Nepal.
It's interesting. One of the things that comes to mind, Emily, and thank you for kind of walking us through that part of it, the number of data centers that are going up in various communities. And I'm going to take the broad brush and say all communities where they're going in. And many of them are rural and they're white, and many of them are rural and they're not white. Many of them are more urban and they're Black or Hispanic or other folks of color, communities of color. But at the end of the day, the thing that is not happening is that the resources that are being used and drained out of those communities aren't, from the other side of the conversation, the data centers are not providing jobs for the people that are in those communities that are giving up the resources for the data centers to be there. So for me, that disconnect is huge. And yes, it's a political conversation, but doggone it, everybody's impacted negatively by them from the environmental piece. But, I guess what I'm trying to say is some people might say, all right, well, if y'all are going to deliver 1,000 jobs with this data center, then we might be able to get our heads wrapped around. We could accept that if there was something that came back to the community. So they're just flat out robbing resources without any return of value to the community. Am I crazy?
No, I would say I would agree with you. And I think a lot of Americans would also agree with you. And I think that's why we're seeing so much pushback against data centers. I also think that's why we're seeing, I think that's why people are also really preparing to push back at the polls in November, because they can see that this administration has created an environment in which, corporations are able to be so brazen as to, completely exploit communities. And there is no benefit to the communities, right? I mean, it's quite brazen to, just totally disregard public opinion in some cases and still erect these massive data centers, which are, consuming water and, detrimental to the environment and not creating jobs, not serving communities in any way. But they're able to do it right now because of this administration and because this administration is allowing them and protecting them in doing so.
Right. Good point. Let's take a quick break, Emily. The number is 773-763-9278. I'm Richard Chu. Keep it locked in. We'll be right back with more of Chu's Views. All right, guys, welcome back to the show. Thanks for being with us. This is Chu's Views. If you're just tuning in, and I am talking with the host of the award-winning Beyond Voting podcast, Emily Williams. Emily, Great to see you this morning, and thank you so much for your diligence and your hard work when it comes to your podcast, but also just being plugged in and keeping folks aware of what's happening. I think the honor and the blessing that folks like you and I have, who have a radio show or a podcast, is that hopefully we get to reach some people and we get to bring some people to the party and say, okay, y'all, we can get this done. And we can get it done by connecting with each other and making sure that people aren't feeling disenfranchised. And there's silos, because with all the attempts right now to distract us, one listener sent a text earlier when I asked about do you think that Trump is going to actually tear down the Kennedy Center because he can't get his name on it. And one person said, I don't know if they will, but basically, and I'm paraphrasing, basically it's just another distraction to keep people not focused on what the midterms, not focused on voting. And so you really had some strong thoughts, and I won't say opinions, but some really strong thoughts and observations about voter interference.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just talking about voting and what's coming up in November. So walk us through where you are in this conversation around voter interference, Emily.
Yeah. Well, number one, we partnered with the Queer News podcast, and we have a forthcoming campaign in September about voter awareness called Chicago, Are We Voting? So definitely find us on the socials and follow along, because we'll be talking to everyday Chicagoans about their feelings about voting, their plans, also what issues matter to them. I think the most important thing for these midterm elections is that people are prepared for interference. We've seen the Trump administration's attempts since 2020 to interfere with elections and the results of elections. They've just got, a recent win around the mail-in ballots, right? And allowing USPS to only send mail-in ballots to an approved list of voters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we know that if that actually happens, that then could drastically reduce the amount of people who are actually able to vote. And that's just one attempt most recently, right? They've attempted to seize voter rolls, right? They've attempted to purge voter rolls, to get people off of the voter rolls. They've already said that they intend to have ICE patrol voting locations on election day. And so, we hopefully at this point we have learned that this administration forecasts what they intend to do. And so, we ought not be caught unaware. But at the same time, I don't hear these conversations about what do we do if ICE is at the voting locations, right?
Right.
How are we prepared for that? What on the other side of the political spectrum, what's their plan, right? I mean, do Democrats have a plan to protect polling places, to protect voters? If they don't, then we need to be calling them and saying, we need you all to have a plan here, right? Don't leave us vulnerable, because we know that this administration is attempting to interfere with elections already.
I agree with you 10,000%. I've been saying versions of that for a while. And I do believe that there is, I don't believe, I've seen those talking about it in some ways, but my add on to what you're saying about the awareness and reaching out to the elected officials is a couple of parts, a couple of things that come to mind for me that I've said, Emily. One of them is, if there is a plan, and if there are things that are going to be done or that are being done, then let us know it. I think that one of the best ways right now, because see, I think that the Trump administration feels as though that they, through ICE, through the Department of Homeland Security, have the edge, and they do because they have the money. They have the edge in that regard, but elections are state run. So when I think about that perception that they have the edge and that it could lead to suppression and depression of people showing up, if that's real, then this is where I say that the AGs, the Democratic AGs, because they're not going to target Republican states or Republican hotspots. They're going to target Democratic cities. They're going to target Houston in a blue city in a red state. They're going to target, Des Moines, Iowa, a blue city in a red state, and the list goes on.
Mhm.
because they're not going to be stupid enough, I believe, and maybe I'm wrong here, to try to come to Chicago and monitor voter locations. I don't think they're going to be that misdirected as they already are to try that. They're going to go to places where it's a blue city and a red state predominantly, because that's where you tend to see the swing state activity voting take place. So they're going to go to Detroit, or they're going to go to Lansing, or they're going to go to places like that. They're going to go to places in Ohio. They're going to go to places in Arizona and others, because they feel like they can have an impact in pushing the conversation as it relates to the swing states and the federal level. On the Senate races and the House races, they're probably going to show up there. So my
Mhm.
thought is the attorneys generals in those states where there's a blue attorney general, he or she needs to be shouldered up with other attorney generals to say, we are prepared to take them to court if necessary based on their actions coming to a state held and state managed election. Your thoughts?
I mean, I think that has to be part of the strategy. I also feel that that's going to be a little bit too late, right?
Mm.
Because, if they're seizing, voting machines and equipment, they're then able to tamper with people's ballots and then declare a win, right? So in some ways, I feel like, yes, of course, we need to use the courts, but that may also be a bit too late, right? I think we may need to see.
So you're thinking
Um,
preemption. We've got to, yeah, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but preemption. We've got to, these next 70 days, the conversation's got to be somewhere in the space of, here's what we're going to do going to the polls. Here's what we're going to be prepared to do on that way, in that moment, and et cetera. Yes, no, am I still way off the base here?
No, 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 correct. Yeah. And I think it's going to have to be, similar to some of these executive orders where mayors of cities are saying, our police force will not cooperate with ICE, right? I think there has to be some sort of equivalent which says, okay, if we see any signs of interference, here's how we will combat that, or here's how we will protect voters in these instances. To say that, number one, the administration can't just get away with this. Number two, to project to voters that we're not going to leave you out here
Yeah.
stranded and vulnerable, right?
So,
And I
so
would think that it's also a matter of self-preservation for many Democrats.
yeah, I think that, yeah, I get with what you're saying, and agree that if we, it's important, it's incumbent on us right now, on us right now to say to people, as a form of beating back the depression or suppression attempts by the potentiality of ICE being there, that local officials should be saying, local and state officials and some federal, that if you show up, first of all, don't. But if you do show up
Right.
to thwart people's attempt to vote in a state-run election, this is what's going to happen to you. You're right.
Exactly.
Telling them now, we'd be damned what Donald Trump wants to do, or Mark Wayne Mullen wants to do with HHS. You come here and you cross the line, you're going to go to jail. And tell them
Yeah.
and let them
Right.
know, because I think that has an impact on the voters feeling like our local authorities, our local law enforcement, they have our backs. Does that?
100%, right. And it also represents the politics of the majority of Americans. The majority of Americans want free, fair, and safe elections. And the many Americans are also pretty dissatisfied with the Democratic Party right now. And so this is an opportunity for the Democratic Party to say, we are going to stand up, right? We can be tough. We can mount some resistance to this administration, and here's one very demonstrable way that we can do that. And so I hope to see some of that.
Yeah, I think that that the more we lean into, here's how we are helping you right now, and here's what our help's going to look like in the future, that's going to be beyond just this midterm election. It's going to be something that will help to sustain the Democrats not doing the yo-yo thing. Certainly on a federal level, we win the midterms, we lose, presidency, or we win the presidency, we lose the midterms, and we constantly are fighting for that, and we never gain because we aren't keeping all. We don't have what the Republicans have right now, which is all three uh, levels, if you will, plus a Supreme Court and many of the governor's mansions. That's
Yeah.
what I've been saying for a long time. We need to take them all at the same time, not just one here and one there, because you never really get any traction. And that to me is why I've been probably overusing the word this week: momentum. Keep the
Mhm.
momentum. Don't break it by doing stupid stuff or saying stupid things or holding silly meetings with people. Don't
Exactly,
you
exactly.
like how I slipped that one in.
I do, I do. I was wondering if you were going to.
Don't hold silly meetings right now. Just keep the momentum of
Right.
what people are asking for.
Exactly,
Emily,
exactly.
there's never. I say this to so many guests. There's never enough time, but I never want anybody to feel rushed. But thank you for being with us this morning. I'm looking forward to having you back on in a couple of weeks. I'm so glad that through our good friend Rico Moat, we found each other, and we can do our best to drive this conversation forward and help as many people be inspired, stay inspired, and be able to do some of the things that they want to do. Because so many people want to be involved right now, and oftentimes they just don't know what to do or which direction to turn. So thank you for carving out a little bit of time this morning. How can folks find you, find the podcast, and get involved with some of the projects that you and your team are working on?
Yes, yes, thank you. So, people can listen to Beyond Voting everywhere you stream podcasts. And then also they can follow us on Instagram at Beyond Voting Podcast. We will be launching our voter awareness campaign starting in September. It's called Chicago Are We Voting? And then people can find me on Instagram at Miss Ems32, which is MSEMS32.
When is it launching? Because I want to have you back on somewhere around that time, either right before or right after.
We'll be launching the first week of September.
Okay. All right. So then maybe
Mhm.
sometime in mid-September we can get back together and have you on, talk about that, and then do it again as we keep getting closer to the midterms. Does that sound okay?
That sounds great.
All
Yeah,
right.
that sounds wonderful.
Emily Williams, y'all, award-winning host of Beyond Voting Podcast. Check out her work. Make sure you are following her, liking her, and sharing it with everybody you know. Emily, thanks for hanging out with us. Have a great rest of the week, okay?
Yes, thank you. You as well.
All right. Bye-bye now.